Welcome to Raw Akademix. This week I'm presenting the show in a different twist, and the reason for that is because instead of just giving you the information of my guest, I want to give you a story. I want to tell you the reason why I'm bringing each and every guest onto Raw Akademix. So without further ado, let's talk about this week's guest of Raw Akademix. This week I'm presenting a discussion with Honey Blue, who is a hip-hop artist located here in the Los Angeles area. In this very first segment, me and Honey Blue go over a series of questions that help me shape her identity for your viewing pleasure. So without further ado, let me introduce all of you to Honey Blue. So I always start the show off with a real important question that I ask everybody, and I ask people if you were to define yourself without the titles of daughter, sister, wife, or any other of significant titles like that, how would you define yourself?
I would define myself with. There's a quote by Kwame Nkrumah, who was the president of Ghana, who liberated his people, and he says, "I am not African because I was born in Africa. I am African because Africa was born in me." Mm-hmm. And so I would use it to describe myself because, being a woman, being a black woman is all-encompassing of all women, right? All African women. And right. So if I don't associate myself with that, being an African woman living in America, then I wouldn't really know myself. I wouldn't know the basis of who I am or what I would need to do for my family and for anybody else. So that quote really is definitive of how I view myself. But I mean, also, I'm the homegirl, you feel me? I got friends, I got family, and it's just I'm a real person, honestly. I have a job, I go to work, I go to school, I'm just an average Joe, you feel me? But that's how I would describe myself in the smallest of terms.
I mean, to me, you seem like you're big because the first time, I actually met you through social media. A friend of mine posted some of your music, and I listened to it, and I was like, wow, this is some powerful stuff.
Thank you.
But the second time face-to-face time I came in contact with you, you were on stage for the Juneteenth performance.
Yes.
And I thought your performance was so powerful, and it's just you move so gracefully on stage. So to say that, from my point of view, to say that you're an average Joe, it's kind of don't you think you're bigger, or you don't see yourself as that bigger entity, or?
Well, I definitely believe that what I do on a day-to-day basis does affect the people around me, right? As just as you may have friends that are affected by what you do with this show or with anything else you do in your life. So I know that what I do has a profound effect on the people I engage myself with. But as far as saying I'm an average Joe, it doesn't mean that I don't have self-empowerment, or I don't feel I'm of value, because I know I'm a very valuable woman, and I know that what I have to say matters and what I do matters. But I'm not a person that believes in upholding power structures or dynamics of power, of which I'm above this person, or I am this and I am that. There's a plethora of scholars, of intellectuals that came before me that create the basis of the spirit that I invoke. So I'm just kind of a product of those people, and a product of the family that raised me, and the friends that raised me as well, So that's how I would say that. But I'm significant, but I'm not to the degree where I believe that I'm above anything. God is above all things.
So let's go to the beginning. How was your childhood growing up here in Los Angeles?
So my childhood was, it's kind of it was good. I can't complain that it was totally unbearable. I moved a lot, so I was raised primarily in LA County, but I lived in like South Bay area of LA County. So like I lived in Compton at one time. I lived in San Pedro. I went to school in Long Beach, and my dad lived in Signal Hill, so I was in Long Beach for a period of time. Then I moved to Victorville in the Valley for like 2 seconds, came back, and then lived back in Long Beach. So I've kind of just always been in LA County, but primarily the South Bay area. And my childhood was it was a blessing because I had my mother to raise and support me. Right. Shout out to my mom. If you see this, love you. But if it wasn't for my mother and my father helping to raise me, I don't think that I would even be who I am. Being in LA has been, I think, liberating for me in the sense where I'm around a culture and I'm around a space where there's so many people here to learn from, and right. It's a diverse type of environment. So I think that helped me to just understand society a little bit more, because there are some places where it's like more rural areas and you don't really see much of anything. Mm-hmm. So I'm grateful for that. But LA is very liberal too. We're in California. It's a very liberal state. So I think that plays a lot into like how I began to think, at least of the world. Right. That's just the beginnings though. That's not necessarily to say how I think now. But I mean, LA, growing up out here, it's been good so far. I honestly could say that like I'm proud to be from LA County or LA. You know what I mean? And it's been a blessing, honestly. And
now before this conversation, or before this, we started rolling cameras and everything. We were having a conversation where you were saying like, how much you love LA, Yeah. And even like in your Sunshine music video, like you show your love for LA. What are like the different little specific little things that like increases that love for LA?
So I would say just the nature. Honestly, although people always say like, well, we're nature. Kenneth Hahn Park is like my favorite park. I love it too. I love Kenneth Hahn. So like just being able to have a space like that, I'm very in tune with nature. I love to go on hikes and stuff like that. So LA has a lot of like hidden gems when it comes to like hikes and just like nature getaways that I appreciate. What else do I love? I love the black owned businesses out here. I love Hot and Cool Cafe. It's one of my favorite places to go. Bloom and Plume is a new one that just opened. Lamert Park, honestly, is a part of LA that you won't really see a lot of other places. Lamert Park has only been really in LA as far as the culture there, and that has invigorated so much within me and my growth. Right. Just being involved in that area. So I think Lamert Park, Kenneth Hahn, and the nature gyms, honestly. And the beaches. I mean, I don't want to be like cliche, but I mean like the fact that we have beaches
at all. You're not gonna get beaches out here like anywhere else.
Yeah, man. I mean, my song was Summertime, and it was about like how I appreciate the beach. You know what I mean? It's a part of the Mother Earth and nature. So man, I think that's the specific things about LA that I really appreciate.
Right, and forgive me, I called it Sunshine. It's summertime. So now that we have a look at the identity of Honey Blue, the next thing I usually go over with my guests is the experience and perspective on the county and city of Los Angeles. Now, for someone who was born after the 80s crack era and also the LA riots that impacted the city and county of Los Angeles deeply, she still feels that the two major events have impacted her life traumatically. But don't take my word for it. Listen to what she has to say. So also you were born prior to the crack era that hit LA, and you were also born before after the 92 riots, correct?
Yes, sir.
Can you explain to me like how those two events still had an impact on your life growing up here in LA? Because I would say like it still had an effect on you, right?
Yeah, most definitely. It has an effect on every African and Black person that still lives here. Especially right now, I think is a time with this presidential election that's coming up, people are starting to see that these instances and occurrences, because the crack epidemic, are still being felt to this day. But specifically, like, how that affected me was, this is a good question. It really affected the way that I viewed police specifically. I think that started just really helping me to understand the nature of the situation now that we are currently under. I think the crack epidemic also made me understood how the police and how the government demonizes black men. And I would know that because my father was incarcerated, and not because of like drugs or anything. My dad went to jail for selling bootleg DVDs and CDs, which now is legal technically, because you can be a street vendor and sell DVDs and CDs, right?
After corporate America made their money on
right, exactly, right. So it's just the crack epidemic. First of all, if we know a little bit of history on that, or have a little bit of scholarship on that, we know that the importation of crack didn't even come from black people, who were the majority criminalized for having crack cocaine, right? Or you know what I mean? So knowing that it came from foreign countries and foreign lands, implemented here to destroy our communities. There's black men that have children, right?
Right.
Children like me, children like my sisters and brothers and things like that are affected by their parents being incarcerated, and now they have to be at home knowing that they may have been incarcerated because maybe they did have crack on them, right? Or in some cases they didn't, right? And now, how do you think that child is going to maintain themselves, or how they're going to start acting now that their parent is gone, from a 1994 crime bill, which was co-written by, what's his name? Sorry, I almost forgot his damn name.
Joe Biden.
Joe Biden, thank you, because that man. But you know what I mean? That was right. He helped write that with Bill Clinton. So it's like, to know that he's running for president again, but he was a direct counterpart into the crack epidemic, which is affecting us still to this day, because our people are still locked up to this day because of that. Directly shows that this is affecting us still, because this man's not running for president, right? So this affects everybody. This affects me, my family, and everybody. You know what I mean? Every American citizen. You know what I mean? Especially black people. So I think that's what I really could say to answer your question.
I mean, that's a very deep response, and I mean, there's very few people of your age who, even my age, there's very few people who are uneducated about the details, and actually also the people behind the details of what criminalized our community, and it's just good to see that that somebody your age, and also somebody as talented as you, because you get to use your talents in combination with your knowledge to deliver a message and an expression that could show people what's really going on out here. Because it's like it's unfortunate, but social media and TV is like our gateway to information. It's like I mean, we're gonna touch upon the different books that you brought here today, but it's like
my babies, my children. I don't have children yet, but those are my children.
Like it's sad how a lot of people shy away from that kind of knowledge.
Can I add to that too?
Sure.
Because before, when we were talking earlier, before this interview started, there's a level of miseducation, right? Because of course, let's define, okay, right? When somebody's uneducated versus miseducated, those are two completely different things, right, in my eyes. And we've been continuously miseducated, right? Carter G. Woodson wrote The Miseducation of the Negro, which Lauryn Hill reapplied to the naming of her album Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, which is how people kind of understood this idea of miseducation, but was written by Carter G. Woodson. And in that book, he kind of lays out exactly in like almost every institution, the medical field, the educational institutions, the economical institutions that run, how we as black people have been continuously fed the wrong information, right? Because even when we learn about maybe instances like the crack epidemic, 9 times out of 10 you don't hear about Joe Biden at all.
Right.
At all. Right? And that isn't to say almost that we're uneducated. We've just been miseducated. Because no one told us that. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, we do have a personal responsibility as people to go look for information if we want to have more resourceful knowledge, right? And that is a direct, action that we have to take upon ourselves.
Right.
But the root is, if we were fed the right information from begin with, then I wouldn't even have to go buy excess amount of books to figure out what the actual fact is.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still going to do it because I like to read personally. But some of our people maybe are blind and they can't see and they can't read technically. And there may not be a large majority of audio podcasts that talk about how Joe Biden was a counterpart within that, right? So you have to think about the different types of people that we deal with, the able-bodied people, the people that can't see, can't hear, that may not have access to the education or the resources that they need. So, miseducation is an important aspect to our conditions as people today and globally. So, yeah, I just want to ask that because my bad. I didn't cut you off.
No, good. No, definitely. In order for us to achieve great success, we all have to have a why. And this next segment, we discuss with Honey Blue the reasons behind her strong political views, her strong social views, and the reason why she uses the art of hip-hop to drive her message. Check it out. What were some of the motivating factors that urged you to consistently and persistently fight for African American communities in the Los Angeles area?
So, my father being incarcerated, I think, was one of them. So that happened when I was about 10 years old, 9, 10 years old.
Right.
And during that time, I went through a lot of changes as a kid. I wasn't always the most attentive child in school just because I think that I just was too excited. And I wouldn't say too excited because they say that about black children all the time, that we have ADHD because we just were children. Right. But after that happened specifically to my father, I just was not really I just was kind of against a lot of stuff. I didn't want to participate in school. I didn't care to listen to teachers. I was angry because my father was gone, and nobody really helped me to cope with that, at the time. And so as I grew older, I didn't want to go to college at first. And my mother was, God bless her mom, she's like, "You gonna go to school? I don't know what you're gonna do, but you need to go to school, or I don't know, but you're going to school." So I was like, okay. I guess I'm going to school then. So, man, it's what it is. So, I went to El Camino Community College, for 3 years, and I was a psychology major at the time. And I took this class that was African American psychology class, taught by Dr. Wayne, and that class really kind of started the engine for me to want to do more and to learn more. Because in African American psychology, let's think about it in the context of college, right? When you go to college, you may have general education requirements, and one of them you can choose psychology. And I took AP psychology in high school, so I kind of already had some introductory knowledge about psychology. But going into the institution, learning this one aspect of psychological trauma or triggers that affect people may not necessarily be the same for people of other ethnicity groups, which is why now in the 21st century there's a conversation in psychology about we need to have a more diverse or inclusive or multicultural understanding of psychology, because we have different ethnicities and different cultures that we're dealing with in America because we're a multicultural society. So that class in particular really ignited me, because all of us as black people living in America have been psychologically affected by the effects of chattel slavery that our ancestors have been through. And even if we don't see that, we have. And not only that, but miseducation as well. If you think miseducation is not mentally doing something to the psyche, then we wouldn't understand why we still think it's a necessity to participate in electoral politics as an act of revolutionary change. So, and that probably was all over the place, but what I said made sense. So
no, I definitely understand.
So I just think that you have to study and understand the psychological effects of our people.
Mm-hmm.
And that class really ignited me to want to start doing more stuff, and just start doing more. So I involved myself in a plethora of activities.
Welcome to a segment that I like to call Change. In this segment, me and Honey Blue have a discussion on how we could approach voting, protest, and democracy differently. Check it out. I want to also dive into the multiple organizations that you're a part of. But before we do that, because maybe whoever views this, I don't think they would understand. I understood completely about what you meant about electoral voting would change our situations. I understood it, but I don't think a viewer would probably not understand. So
Okay.
let me just ask you, why do you feel like electoral voting will not change our situation?
Okay, I'm so glad you asked this question. So I'm gonna read because honestly, I'm gonna keep it a whole hundred. So as a person, right? I'm a person.
Mm-hmm.
I have views that change.
Mm-hmm.
2018, I think. No, I'm sorry.
And I read that about you because you were I think 2 years ago you said you were very into voting, we have to vote.
Yeah.
But now it's I've seen you recent statements you've said where voting is only half the battle, and you're not as active in voting anymore than you were before. Is that a fair statement?
It's a fair statement, partially. So it's a background story, and I believe in the Most High. I believe in God. I believe in my ancestors, and I truly believe that God placed me in a situation to where I was meant to believe what I believe now at this specific time. Because in 2016, when the elections were happening with Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, I was 18. I barely just turned 18, so I wasn't even allowed to vote at the time because I wasn't old enough. I had barely reached the age, and primaries, all that had ended, so I couldn't even vote in that election. But I still felt my ancestors died for my right to vote, and so I need to go vote, right? And I mean, and as a young person that never has voted before, first of all, we have a culture, American culture, that perpetuates voting to children, right? But doesn't give a deep analysis on how even the process works. So that already right there is kind of skeptical, because it's how are you going to push a young child to vote but not really talk about the entire aspects of that? Because even growing up, I didn't really know that there was primaries, there was general, I didn't know that there was different steps of electoral politics. I really only knew vote for the president in November, right? So that already right there is the miseducation at play, and then the culture of voting in America at play, right? So I'm gonna read this quote by George Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
Real quick, for anyone that doesn't know who George Jackson is, this month is Black August. Black August is a month that we commemorate political prisoners, and we appreciate the contributions that Black people have made and our soldiers and warriors have made in this month, because so much historically has happened in the month of August in terms of African American history. And George Jackson was he was a revolutionary, and he was assassinated on August 21st, 1971 in Marin County Jail, a year after his younger brother, who was 17 years old, Jonathan Jackson, was assassinated on August 7th. So George Jackson, in his book Blood in My Eye, said this quote, and he says, "Participation in electoral politics organized by the enemy state, after recognizing that the whole process must be discredited as a conditional step into revolution, and particularly participation that tends to authenticate this process, is the opposite of revolution." Okay, it's the opposite of revolution. So if we are to be in this day and age, participating in Black Lives Matter movements, participating in this emotional, in this fight for Black people, right? Mm-hmm. And we shout revolutionary change. Well, what is the definition of revolutionary? We have to first look at the definitions and really understand what that means. You think about revolution, that means the total destruction of all means of production that eats away at the poor and working class masses of people. Which means any system that upholds that system is not revolutionary. So how am I to, I don't even proclaim this out loud. My friends know and my people know who I am. After this interview, now y'all know how my views are. I don't believe I need to go out there and say I'm a revolutionary to have that energy in my heart.
Right.
But if I participate in a system that, number one, was built off of black slave labor and African labor and the total destruction of my people, that's already a kind of like, okay. Then for me to participate in a system which only allows me to vote Democratic or Republican, right? What if I don't align with any of these parties? Am I supposed to just settle for what's there and totally disregard my own beliefs and my own morals? I'm not doing that. Unless there's a party that reflects my views for the liberation of all African and black people globally and in this nation, I'm not voting. Because why would I belittle myself to vote either Democratic or Republican? Which if we don't know, Malcolm X teaches that Democrats are Dixiecrats, which was kind of like a mockery of the fact that Democrats present themselves as liberal or this party that so-called cares. But the majority of people in that party are in the upper class bourgeoisie, class structure, which most of the time doesn't identify with poor working class people. Or global struggles that happen in places like Africa, Sudan, Yemen, etc. So, me participating in that electoral process is counter-revolutionary.
Right.
So that's why I don't believe, and that's why I don't really participate, or I don't believe that to be something that I should do. And what I said in the beginning, how I think that was divine and how possibly God had placed me in this position, because I wasn't even allowed to vote for when Donald Trump was getting elected, and now I can vote. And now I'm not going to. So so I think that there's a reason for that, because I had the time to study what exactly is going on, so I can make a thorough analysis when I did choose to vote. But I chose not to, because George Jackson taught me that why would I do that if I believe in revolutionary change? That's the opposite of revolutionary. So I would definitely say that. I want to talk a little bit more about like the political situation, but I'll wait. Like I'll stop right there because it's kind of a lot. But yeah, so.
Let me see. We're actually about to dive into more about the voting process.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, that was my next question to ask you, the reason why you changed your voting, your thoughts about voting, and so go ahead and dive deeper into the process of voting and how you feel about it.
Well, I don't want to give light to that, because that's not. I don't want to give light to too much about the process, but I will say this because I think it's interesting how we're having this interview today, but just yesterday it was announced that Kamala Harris is now going to be running candidate for vice president with Joe Biden, who we just now know was a part of writing the 1994 crime bill, which incarcerated the masses of our people. So, knowing that Kamala Harris went to Howard, HBCU, black woman, oh my God, black woman in office, woohoo, yeah, right, no, wrong. Because Kamala Harris has openly stated time and time again that she is for mass incarceration. We live in America, and this country incarcerates the most amount of people in the world. Okay, which means that the general population of citizens that are in this country, half of them, the majority of them are behind bars, which means there are more people that are behind bars in this country than there are people that are walking free right now. And the majority of those people are black men and brown men, men of color, right? So, and black women. So it's like to think about that and knowing that this woman supports that is a mockery, because then again it goes to say, why would I disregard my beliefs, and why would I disregard my people, who some of them are still behind bars because they simply couldn't afford bail, right? Some of them are behind bars literally for no reason, like Mumia Abu-Jamal, who was arrested by Philadelphia police under this country for being a journalist. knowing that there are people that are behind bars because they can't afford bail, because they're political prisoners like Mumia, who openly spoke about the violence against the police state in Philadelphia and globally and nationally to our people, and did absolutely nothing but be a journalist and try to hash out what the pigs were doing to the people in the community is absurd. And if people that are, or candidates that are running for president can't even do something as simple as say, well, let's first free our political prisoners, right? The least you could do is that. Because we already know these people have been locked up for literally no reason, and you can't free them. Like, you can't even do one thing that we've been asking for time and time again. Then that shows where your agenda stands. Your agenda is not for black people or African people, as a matter of fact. So, knowing that we have Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, possibly they could be the next president and vice president. Sure, we have Donald Trump and what's the vice president's name? I can't even think.
Mike Pence.
Mike Pence. There you go. That man in office. At the end of the day, we're still going to be having issues in this country, despite who's in office, because this country has time and time again showed us its fascist nature. And people want to argue this country's not fascist because it doesn't look like what Adolf Hitler's regime was in Nazi Germany. But what about economic fascism, right? What about corporations continuously making billions of dollars off of enslaving black people under the 13th Amendment, under imprisonment, right?
Right.
So if you can't do something as simple as free political prisoners and those who can't afford bail or those who've been indicted for years, then why would I vote?
I want to thank you all for continuing to watch Raw Akademix. We're far from done. In fact, we're going to talk about how we could take ourselves a little bit more seriously in the approach of change. In this following concept, me and Honey Blue have a conversation of knowledge of self, as well as tactics the Black Panther Party used to train its members in order to protest political and social issues. What are some of the changes that we should make as an African American community in order to attract the lifestyle that we desire and obtain the lifestyle that we deserve?
So there's this song by Black Star, Mos Def and Talib Kweli, called Knowledge of Self, Determination, KOS, Determination. And in that song, it's really about the song title, Knowledge of Self and Determination. If you're at home, right, and let's say you at the house and you just minding your business and you're like, maybe I should, I feel like I don't know myself. I feel like I don't have anything to do with the struggle that us black people face, in America or in Africa. I don't feel like I identify with that. Well, first it takes you as a person saying that I'm going to do something about that. Because we can march on the street for black lives and in the name of Breonna Taylor, rest in power, and George Floyd, right? But if we don't go home after that and do critical study, and we don't go home and want to continue to learn or find organizations that are already doing work similar to what you want to do as a person, then you are already limiting yourself to what can be done on a mass level, because the masses of any organized struggle comes from the individual choosing to participate in the daily activities it means to be a part of a global revolution or a global struggle. So I think as people, we need to take ourselves more seriously, because we beg and plead for people to take us seriously, but we don't take ourselves seriously enough. Because if you took yourself seriously, you would do all that you can with the freedom you have outside of prison walls or outside of actual enslavement to do what you can to enliven yourself. Because there's folks like Albert Woodfox, who was incarcerated for 4 decades, 40 years in solitary confinement, but he said, no matter what happens while I'm in the cell, like I'm doing whatever I can to free my mind. Because you can shackle my body, but you can't shackle my mind. And if we don't have that same responsibility, or if we don't feel that same responsibility while we're not even in prison, then we're imprisoning ourselves mentally because we're not doing anything to want to make necessary revolutionary change working in an organization or a mass body of people. Because it's one thing to say, I'm a part of an organization and everybody in the organization is misled, or everybody in the organization just don't know what's going on. It's like, yeah, y'all look powerful because there's a lot of y'all, but what do y'all think? What is your level of your train of thought, your strategy? And you don't have a strategy because you haven't studied, because you felt like you didn't have a personal responsibility because someone's going to do it for me. Then they're going to they're going to do it for me.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
Well, then...
And there's a lot of organizations like that, unfortunately, within our community where, we depend on that one person. But obviously, I think what you're trying to say is that if we're going to form an organization, I think it's everybody's part to obtain a little bit of knowledge so we can all play part in that strategy in order to succeed. Am I correct?
Most definitely. And one thing I will add too is that there's this misconception about the Black Panther Party, which a lot of us, we feel spiritually connected to because of just what the party has done and what we've seen during the party, but we don't really look in depth of the membership process that certain chapters made members go through to be an actual Black Panther. It wasn't just like, I'm a Black Panther now and that's what it is. I have a pin, I have a black hat on, and I'm the Black Panther. Like, no. Chairman Fred Hampton, who was the chairman of the Chicago, Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party, who was assassinated by the pigs, he in the chapter made sure that the folks that were going to join went through a 6-week process. I'm sorry, I think it was either 6 weeks or 6 months. Please either fact check me, whoever's watching this. I know the number is 6, but went through a political educational process to make sure that folks understood the rhetoric and the ideology behind the party, so that way they had a direct political stance. Because then you'll have folks like Kamala Harris who, yeah, you're Black, but what is your political ideology? Is your political ideology Black power?
Right.
No? Okay, then you can't be part of this organization then. Because who are you working for? Where's your heart at? If your heart's not with the people and helping us get out of poverty, get out of hunger, get out of miseducation, and it's not for upholding a sense of unity and power within all African people and Black people in this country and globally, then why would you join, or why should you join this organization? Because you're just going to detract from the progress that needs to be made, right? And it's not to say that that you can't grow or you can't get the education, but I think that there needs to be more emphasis on study, though, because it's too many folks out here marching and they don't even know what they're marching for. Of course they on an outside level we know it's on behalf of the people, but it's one thing to have a march and then go home and then now I'm back to my old stuff. Well, you have to organize after that too.
Right.
You have to study after that too. Ain't just a one all. I have a picture of myself and I did it. It's in the history books that was archived by some white man. You know what I mean? That it wasn't even. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, I just think there needs to just be more study and just more education on our parts, because we know the enemy's not going to educate us.
Right.
So we must do for ourselves. We must have knowledge of self and determination, like Mos Def and Talib Kweli, Black Star, stated in that song.
Now, there's a spin-off because, like, in what your answer was, it sounded like I just caught a flash in my mind, and maybe I'm throwing energy out there that for a possibility. But I'm a big out of all politicians that are currently in office, I'm a big supporter of AOC, Alexandria or Ocasio Cortez. So, she's part of what is called it's a slight Democratic Party, but she's part of the brand new Congress, and I know that you're a part of multiple organizations. Do you think our organizations, our African American Black organizations, should be breeding politicians or breeding people that should run for office just to get ourselves in there more, or do you think another strategy should be created?
That's a great question. So I don't believe in electoral politics really saving anybody. But what I do believe in regards to voting is if you're going to choose to vote and have people that represent you in your beliefs, do it on a county and a city based level.
Gotcha. Because
what I've been seeing, and as I've been just kind of observing the world, I noticed that policies and things that happen in cities directly affect the people more than presidential elections affect people.
Right.
So of course, what policies get passed or bills get passed in office on behalf of Congress, the Senate, and the president, to some degree matters, but I feel like it matters more in foreign relations and it matters more in international relations, because you still have wars in Yemen and you still have wars in Africa that happen internationally to our people that we barely know about, that is because of the United States government, right? But when it comes to poor working class people that are here, that we go through every day, 9 times out of 10 is because of the current county that we live in. So, for example, like this year, since it was my first time voting, but I voted for LA County because I was working on a campaign called Reform LA Jails, which I don't necessarily believe in reformism, but I joined Reform LA Jails because I wanted to understand the process, because I believe if you don't study the enemy, you are not going to understand the enemy, right? So I was like, okay, let me just involve myself with this, with Reform LA Jails.
Right.
And Reform LA Jails was pushing a measure called Measure R, which basically was for police accountability in LA. And it got passed, which I believe is a step in the right direction, because you have at least LA County, right, which, by the way, statistically, LA County incarcerates the most amount of, jails the most amount of people in the world. LA County. Well, I'm not even talking about mass incarceration in America. I'm talking about LA County.
Right.
Jails the most people in this country, in the world.
Wow.
Just this county alone. Because so many people, move here.
Right.
There's so many people here. So just to know that statistic alone, I think is a step in the right direction for a measure like that to get passed. Because there was a case where you couldn't even get police documentation of the activities they were doing behind closed doors. Well, with Measure R, now you can have access, the general public can have access to these documentation, so we know what's going on. It should have already been a thing, but it's a step in the right direction. And not only was it for police accountability, but it was also to provide services for those who are incarcerated dealing with mental health issues, substance abuse issues, and etc. So now what we need to do is, since that has been passed, there needs to be pressure put on Reform LA Jails and those who helped enact that to be passed, to make sure that we're holding them accountable as well for what they wanted to happen. So I like, Alexandria. I mean, I've heard some of her politics before, and I don't necessarily disagree totally with everything she's doing, and I think that any woman that chooses to stand against this fascist government is brave and is very courageous and bold. And I commend her for what she's done, but I don't agree with electoral politics in that way. I feel like there could be so much more power put behind, those that are currently running what happens every day in your cities and counties, because you directly live there. So that directly affects most people.
Right.
Organizations. I think one key component in creating change is having multiple organizations. Not organizations that just clean up our community, but organizations that also improve us as people. In this next segment, me and Honey Blue are going to go over a list of organizations that she is a part of that not only changed her community, but also changed her as a person. How many, if you don't mind me asking, how many organizations are you a part of?
So,
because I think we ran through the list before the interview, so.
Yeah, so technically I'm only a part of a grade in one. I put the majority of my energy into New Era Long Beach. Shout out New Era, woo woo, Black Power, yes sir. But Yeah, so New Era Long Beach is like the main organization that I'm a part of, but I have friends and comrades, and I have worked with the African Black Coalition, which is a coalition of UCs, CSUs, and Black student unions that come together and provide services and solutions for our people. It's a blessing to be a part of that, just because that right there it showcases the young radical minds that are in the college institutions that are trying to fight for change, right? And here in South Central LA, there is a organization called Community Coalition, which is more of a co-op organization of Black people, brown people, and poor working class people, which I appreciate. I appreciate the work that Coco has done. I was involved with Coco at one point, but I started getting more involved with New Era Nation and New Era Long Beach, and so the majority of my energy goes to that right now. So I would say about like 3 organizations. Oh, and then when I was in community college 2 semesters ago, I was vice president of Black Student Union, and that was my first introduction to like organizing really at all. And I love El Camino BSU so much. I love Black Student Union so much. They're so valuable.
June 19th, 2020. Where were you? What were you doing? I'll tell you what Honey Blue was doing. She was in Lamart Park putting on a performance of her life. In this segment, me and her are going to have a conversation about how she prepared for her performance. Also, what she did after her performance. And lastly, comparing June 19th or Juneteenth to the 4th of July. And how does she feel about people who celebrated both June 19th or Juneteenth and July 4th? Take a look. What are your personal thoughts and opinions of the huge the huge remembrance? I guess I could say of Juneteenth this year. Like prior to this year, there wasn't that much talk about it, but due to the recent killings with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. It's been actually magnified. But what are your thoughts and opinions of it?
So Juneteenth this year was very prolific for me in a sense where it was like my first time outwardly celebrating Juneteenth. I'm sorry, I have something in my eye. I'm good. So basically this year it was powerful because I had performed this Juneteenth in Lamar Park, which you say you saw.
Right.
And that within itself was like just crazy for me because like there is a pandemic going on, okay, and a lot of people came out to that, so it's like you have to be safe, you have to be aware, but I'd rather die for what I believe in and die doing what I love than staying inside and not. You know what I mean? So so just Juneteenth within itself and this year alone, I think has wakened so many people up to the fact that, why are we celebrating the 4th of July? Or why is that's a tradition that's carried out in our families? And not just Black families, any family, because the birth of the 4th of July totally negates what liberation or freedom means for anybody.
Right.
If anything, it's freeing the colonialists that have chosen to choose this mass of land, which was native land to begin with, to celebrate freedom. So Juneteenth was great. It's so funny because that day, like, some personal stuff happened in my life as well. Like, a whole shift happened that day. But it was just so memorable for me. I think that all that happened for a reason. So I think it's just to show us that, first of all, we don't need to go to the U.S. and say, make Juneteenth an actual holiday. Because all they're going to do is capitalize off it. Like, they capitalize off every single holiday. Why do you think that America is the only country that really has holidays like that? Christmas, you get a whole bunch of shit, and where does it go? Corporations. So if you know what I mean? So I don't think we should beg for someone to give us Juneteenth or as a national holiday. do it within your homes, because it really starts the traditions you carry within your household. Right. If you as a mother or a father know that you have children, but you don't choose to teach them about what Juneteenth was and then make it a celebratory aspect within your own homes, then there's no real change, because change happens at home. Right. So that's what Juneteenth, really meant for me this year, and what I feel like we should think about Juneteenth.
Now, what do you how do you feel about those who celebrated both Juneteenth and the 4th of July within our community? Do
you? Mm-hmm. If I'm not here to change anybody's mind. I'm just here to just be myself and to speak on behalf of myself and the people that I rock with. But I do know that most of the time, even though I could say, why are you celebrating that, blah, 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 like, I'm not the one to go out here and, like, police everybody for doing personal decisions. That's your personal decision. You do that. Also, I know that, the majority of us that do celebrate 4th of July are not really celebrating the 4th of July. We just get together with our family, we eating food, and we having a good time. We just chose that day because 9 times out of 10, all of us had work off that day because the government chose to make it a national holiday.
Right.
So,
that's true.
It's not like we in here, this is the Declaration of Independence and we're going to study this and that. No, we come together, we eat food, and we go home. You know what I mean? Right. So, if you did that, I'm sure the majority of our people that celebrated it was celebrating time with their family. Right. Not necessarily that alone. But would it have much more significance knowing that Juneteenth was, it's not even I wouldn't call it a holiday, it's when our people got, actual freedom, fought for their freedom. Having it on that day would be much more significant to understanding our struggles as Black people and what we need to be fighting for politically and economically and socially in this country and globally. That would have much more impact. Then we could actually study on that day, because I think that's important as well, Right.
Who are some of your favorite civil rights leaders or activists?
Okay. Mumia Abu-Jamal. Most definitely. Assata Shakur, very prolific. George Jackson and Jonathan Jackson. Jonathan Jackson was 17 years old when he chose to invade the courthouse to free his brothers, armed, in the name of liberation, and was assassinated at 17 years old. If that's not, bravery, I don't know what is. So, Jonathan Jackson, and I would probably say Kathleen Cleaver. I've been getting so angry recently because the National Archives, which is basically is owned by the United States government, holds a lot of archives of our people during the Black Liberation Movement, the Black Power Movement. And Kathleen Cleaver, if you look on YouTube or look her up, there's not a lot of speeches that are like publicized that she spoke at, except the UCLA one, which is that right there is very prolific. You should listen to it. I highly recommend. It's really good. But they own so much of the content that was recorded and audio recorded during that time, and we don't even know all of what she was speaking about besides that 1 to 2 videos on YouTube, because they own it. You know what I mean? So but I would say that those are some people that I really identify with. Kwame Nkrumah. I'm so sorry, I almost forgot Kwame Nkrumah from Ghana, because that man is prolific. He breaks down neocolonialism, what exactly that is, and how America is under neocolonial rule, and we don't understand it because we live in a first world country, so we don't even see our problems as really big ass problems because we can't necessarily identify with their real struggles as concretely. But neocolonialism, Kwame Nkrumah, those the people I would say I identify with.
So Dr. Melina Abdullah says that Black Lives Matter is a spiritual movement as well as a social and racial movement. Do you agree with her, or do you agree or disagree with her, and why?
I totally agree with that. Funny story. So I was at the African Black Coalition conference this January, and she spoke at the conference, and she actually talked about how Black Lives Matter was a spiritual movement. And I remember writing that down on my paper. So I was like, wow, he put that in this interview. That's cool. This is divine all the way around. But I think that's so vital because, the flesh without spirit is dead. If we don't have spirit, if we didn't have an understanding of the divinity of the sixth sense that we have, to where we can even feel empathy from all people and identify what struggles globally that are not necessarily what we're dealing with here, then we wouldn't really have the drive to do anything, because we would have no spiritual essence to do anything. And spirit directly affects culture, and I'm not just talking about culture like what we wear. I'm talking about the culture, the things that we do on a daily basis, the simple actions that we partake, upon. And I do believe that it's very much a spiritual movement as well, even though it's not dogmatic spiritualism like Christianity or Muslim or whatever. It's of the spirit, right? There's no book for that. There's not really. It's a feeling, and it's something that when you meditate upon the movement, and when you're meditating upon the Black Liberation Movement, because that's a whole other conversation. But think of the acronyms BLM, Black Lives Matter. Don't forget BLM, the Black Liberation Movement, which was a catalyst for this 2020, and before that in Ferguson that started Black Lives Matter. So anyway, I definitely agree with that statement. It really is spiritual for me. Like I said, flesh without spirit is dead. You know what I mean? So I definitely agree with that, for sure.
So now we get into the fun stuff. In this segment, me and Honey Blue have a conversation about hip hop. What inspired her to become a hip hop artist? Who inspired her to become a hip hop artist? And last but not least, how does she feel that she can contribute to the culture? If hip hop were to evolve into a culture that you would imagine in your mind, what would it look like to you?
Oh my God, that's such a good question. Well, I mean, hip hop is a culture, already within itself. But I would love to see more conscious rap be in mainstream media, which we'll see if that happens. I don't know if that will ever be, but I would love to see more conscious hip hop for sure. When I think about hip hop, it was really kind of first introduced to me because my father, my dad raps, and like he's a show lyrical MC. Like my dad has lyrics, you know what I mean, and that has always been so important for me, which is why I feel like as an artist, people know me from performing, but I don't even have an actual like project out because I'm so particular with what my lyrics say, because I know the effects that they have on people. So I'm just very like patient with myself, and like I make sure that I like what I said is like what I meant, because lyrics hold power. So I think that if there's a culture to re-evolve in hip hop, it should be more emphasis on the lyrical content, because we forget that children listen to this music, right? Even though people want to have the argument, this song was made for adults. Well, it's still played. It's radio airplay still. So what is that argument? It's a faulty argument to me. So I think there should be way more emphasis on lyrical content and just like the type of topics we choose to talk about within our music. Like I said before, I love like Mos Def, Talib Kweli, Queen Latifah. Yeah, I think you have a question about that. I'm gonna. But just as a culture in general, though, I think there just needs to be emphasis on that, and then having fun as well too. I think having fun is it's not as emphasized enough. There's another like more like upcoming artist. He's not upcoming, but he kind of has an established career now. His name is Super Duper Kyle. And I remember like I used to listen to him a lot in high school, and even though he's not like necessarily like a conscious rapper, I appreciated him because he held the cadence of having fun, which De La Soul like would emphasize a lot within their music as well. Right. Before they made Stakes is High, you know what I mean? Which was like more political, more economic, things like that. But it's about having fun and playing the dozens and just like encompassing. It's so much more than just music. Right. You know what I mean? It's so much more than that. And to go just briefly, I remember when I was starting college, how I said it before, I was a psych major at first before I became an Africana Studies major. I was a psychology major because I wanted to study the effects of how hip-hop affected cognitive behavior, because I noticed as a child how much I was affected by the music I listened to, which I was like, I know I'm not the only person whose like mentality is like being shifted because of what I listen to on a daily basis. And I'm like, that needs to be studied more thoroughly because it's it happens,
Right.
You think that music doesn't affect the way that you think? I've seen brothers and sisters like literally change their whole mind because Roddy Ricch said something in his song. You know what I mean?
Oh yes, definitely.
So it's important that we have balance in our music.
Right.
I fuck with Roddy Ricch. I like him. You know what I mean? I mess sometimes. I like it's a time and place for certain music, right?
Right.
So create my music for times where we need to listen to some actual knowledge.
Let me ask you this: like, do you feel like your song "Summertime" was for a diverse crowd and do you encourage that kind of diversity?
Yeah, most definitely. I identify with the youth, right? No matter black, you know what I mean? I'm still a young person, right? And a lot of us are, growing into adulthood and coming out of adolescence, and we all, no matter what creed or color, have to go through that change from being a child to an adult.
Right.
And so, I make music for everybody, even though I may have songs like How Many, which that song was more about the struggle of black women and, what we go through in revolutionary issues and times. It was still for everybody because education is for everybody as well. You know what I mean? So, that's, I kind of almost forgot what you just said.
I was asking you, like, is your music
for everybody?
Is it for everybody?
Yeah.
For a diverse crowd?
Yes, there we go. So yes, I'm so sorry, but yes, I would definitely agree with that. I definitely agree with that. Music is for everybody. It's for everybody. It's a universal language. It's the language of God. I mean, my friend always talked about that. Why is it that we have a million languages, but most of the time people understand music, you know what I mean? Right. Or they can identify with a song. How is that a singer like, I don't know, Beyonce is so known everywhere, but like she sings majority in English. You know what I mean? So my music is for everybody. I don't necessarily make music for a specific person. If you heard my song, you were meant to hear it because you chose to click on it, or somebody showed it to you for a reason. So. And
it is like the reason why I asked you that as well is because we're oftentimes, like, when we're so strong about our community and uplifting our community, and we even say it in our music, and we say it in just conversations like this. Mm-hmm. A lot of times we become vilified, and it's not fair, And that's the reason why I asked that question, because come from today, I don't want a young person like you who I feel is a leader to be vilified. I feel like your music is very important for our community, and and not just our community, but also a diverse audience as well. Mm-hmm. And that's the reason why I asked the question of, how much do you promote diversity? And just so our viewers can hear it, and because I know it and I see it, but somebody, if this comes across the wrong person, and they like to switch the message, and I don't want your message to be switched up.
I appreciate that for sure, most definitely. And I will say that not every song I come out with is gonna be politically, conscious or tailored, right? I'm a musician. I love all types of music, and I'm a human being. You know what I mean? Like, I write about real shit. You know what I mean? Like, things I go through as a woman growing up, breakups, what happened to me the other day, or something. You know what I mean? I just write about day-to-day experiences as a person. You know what I mean? And I read too, so that's gonna show in my music as well. So I'm very inspired by so many artists that have shown me that I can be fluid in my music, and I can talk about whatever I want to, because it's freedom of speech. You know what I mean? And there's a song by this MC. Her name is Raida Raw. She's from DC. I just discovered her like a couple months ago. Do you know who that is?
No, I don't know. But
no, she's so good, yo. Like, oh my god. But I listened to her Tiny Desk, and what does she say in her song? I felt it so much, but my life is only like a highlight in my life some days. Oh, basically she talks about how like the mic is like her safe haven. Oh, her music is her temple of worship, so come praise, right? And I'm like that. I identify with that so much, because it's like I said again, like, music is universal.
Right.
Even though in her music, I would identify her as a conscious rapper, but it's a place of worship, and everyone can feel what she said in the song, despite who she chose to make it for, what the specific audience she was trying to cater to. Anyone that listens to that can feel that energy, and I aim to exemplify that same energy with my music. I hope that anybody can gain something from my music. You know what I mean? We all go through real life stuff. There's poor whites that deal with real shit too.
Right, yeah.
You know what I mean? So yeah, most definitely.
The reason why I made that noise is because it's like, you know, just the knowledge again. Like, you know so much about, you know, your hip hop culture and, like, you know, your community culture. You know, so it's like it's more than me. You know. So yeah, I just find it as deep. You know, very deep. And who are some of your favorite hip hop artists?
My pops, man. Cat Eyes, what's the dealio? Cat Eyes in the building. I'm honestly very inspired by my father. Like, I grew up around my dad, so my dad used to always play his own music in the car. So it's like, that's really what I listened to a lot growing up, was my father. And he just wrote so much, like, real life experiences. And it was crazy as a child to, like, see what he was going through and then make a song about it. And it's like, I've seen you go through that. So my father really inspired me. Tupac is also like one of my like people that I like look up to, or just like someone that I was very inspired by. I used to watch his interviews all the time when I was young, and I really believe that like he was like a catalyst for me wanting to like be okay with, you know, speaking about what's going on and writing about it as well. Because I hear you talking about how, you know, every song is not about like political anything. Well, you know, we can see that with Tupac. He had, you know, keep your head up and then I get around, right? Which is like two totally different messages in songs, but it's like he's a person, you know what I mean? Right. And he used to always talk about that within his interviews. So Tupac, my father, Queen Latifah. I love Queen Latifah so much. I feel like nobody really like talks about her anymore. I like her music.
One of her songs are like my favorite, like the UNITY.
Yes, man, Unity for sure. Like that song bumps. That song and just Black Rain, like that whole album by her, it was so good. Yes. Like it was so good, and you know,
the jersey's coming out of me, right?
Oh, there we go. Yeah, so man, you already feel it. So you know, just I love Queen Latifah, and you know, her songs really like taught me a lot too, because it was more than just like her lyrical cadence and like how she can perform, but what she taught me. Like I remember in her song, what song is it? It's on Black Rain. I can't think of the song right now. But basically, she was talking about how like practicing safe sex, right? Which I think is important as a young person, like hearing that to like even be taught those types of lessons. A song called Fly Girl, which I love by her, helped me to like learn how to like make sure I respect myself as a woman and like I choose the right men, right? Like she used to always talk about that within her music. And oh my God, like what is this Black, oh my God, I really want to like sing the lyrics right now because it's so
Queen
important.
Latifah's?
Yes, it's a song.
Hold on, let me see if I can help you out here.
I got it, man. It's like, oh my God, I have to find it because it's gonna bother me. But yeah, like just Queen Latifah, Tupac, my dad, and who else do I love? Like was Jill Scott. I will say that too. It's on Black Rain, by the way.
Yeah.
But yeah, Jill Scott, I love her so much because you know, I'm a poet and a spoken word artist, so that's a lane that I definitely I used to always identify myself as a writer first. Thank you so much. And Jill Scott, you know, she sang with such soul and a heart within her music, and she was, you know, really a poet as well. I have her poetry book, and it's just beautiful to see like poems be turned into music and exemplified, you know, just very beautifully. And she's a songwriter as well. It's like she's written a lot of people's songs that most people don't know, and I'm a writer first as far as like music is concerned. Like I like I said, lyrics are writing, so like I identify with that. So those are some like artists that I really identify with.
So are we gonna see any collaborations between you and Cat Eyes?
Oh man, most definitely. Me and my dad already got some songs and it's not out yet, but we already got some music, so it's coming on the way.
Yes. Nice. Is it inspiring to sit down with your dad and like write? Because I got my inspiration from my brother. My brother is 13 years older than me, and that's where I started writing. You know, so is it like, what kind of feeling do you get when you write with your dad?
To be honest, I wish I wrote more with my dad because my dad is a working class, hardworking black man. He's always working, and when he gets home, he's still working on something else, and then he's tired. So like, I don't always get to like spend as much time with him writing, but I do remember the instances what I did, and it was just so like, it was so refreshing and very invigorating for me because, first of all, that's my dad, you know what I mean? So it's like I have that like that spiritual essence, like this is why I am who I am, you know what I mean? Like you are, I'm a derivative of you. So writing with him also like assures me how I can get better because like I'm still not as good as my dad. Like in my own eyes, like I can do, like I'm trying to reach my dad's level of like lyricism, and so you know, like writing with him is like a different experience. Like I remember we was writing this song and about like him being incarcerated and like me from the outside, like what I was dealing with when he was in there, and just like having to write that song was like emotional because we both had to tap into a place where like we haven't been there in a long time. Right. We had to like dig deep into like old repressed memories, you know, and it was just like a moment that like I won't forget writing the song. So it is just basically like a reminder of like why I am who I am and like why I choose to like still make music, or why I think it's vital to create music, right? That's the feeling that I get from my father, you know. But for show music coming on the way for me, my pops, like, yeah, nice. That's no doubt about that.
Nice. I think that one of the best ways to be creative is by absorbing as much knowledge as possible. Before passing away, Nipsey Hussle instructed us to read a list of books that helped him become more creative in his journey. So I asked Honey Blue to bring by a few books that helped her become more creative in her journey. Check it out. Nipsey Hussle had recommended a reading list. What books would you recommend to the black community?
Okay. Was there a specific amount or no?
I said 10 books, but...
Okay, because I'm making sure, because I don't want you to say that and then you didn't, because I know you said 10 on there, yeah. So I don't want to be like, damn, that's all them books, but you said 10. So yeah. I brought some books. So the first one I would recommend, can I see? Okay, yeah. The first one I recommend is Our Prison's Obsolete by Angela Davis. This book is vital just because, you know, we're dealing with this election, right, which if we know if Joe Biden and Kamala Harris win, they're both for mass incarceration. So we need to understand what alternatives we have to mass incarceration, and Angela Davis talks about that in this book. It's fairly small. It's a pretty easy read. It's not too hard to understand, and it just kind of breaks down the you know, what happens in the prison system, the privatization aspects of the prison system, what alternatives or different types of, you know, systems can be put in place of that. I think it's very vital. Still Black, Still Strong. This book was highly important for me because basically it's an interview between either prison guards or the FBI for political prisoners. Daruba bin Wahad, Mumia Abu Jamal, and Assata Shakur. And it has basically their interviews in there. And it's interesting to like read an interview and have it like be it all in their own words, you know what I mean, on paper, because sometimes you can hear things that get misconstrued, and you know, having a book that like you can see exactly what they said and you know this is what they said, and it's powerful. Like you have to read the book to really like feel the energy that's in the book. But also in the back of this book, they have FBI documents of like what was happening during the time, and it's like that's vital too, because you know, we know about the counterintelligence, if we don't know, about COINTELPRO, the counterintelligence program, which directly attacked black leaders and black organizations. But we don't like know the documentation or the process that made sure that program was implemented and it succeeded. And it's important to have those documents. So that's one. No disrespect. You feel me?
my sister soldier.
My sister soldier. This book, honestly, I read this book when I was in high school. I think it was like freshman year or like sophomore year, one of those.
Mm-hmm.
And just this book was just a really great novel, honestly. Yes, novel. I don't really read novels like that because I read a lot of nonfiction, but this book was written so well to me because you can feel everything that she writes about, that she personally went through in this book, and that like black women deal with, and black people deal with in this book, and she kind of shows you the socioeconomic issues that happen in a narrative that's easy to understand and people can identify with. So, Sister Souljah, no disrespect, but I had to put that in there. We Want Freedom by Mumia Abu-Jamal. This book, I just finished this like maybe a couple months ago, and this was vital because it's about his life in the Black Panther Party, and he goes into different chapters about like for example there's a chapter on the woman in the Black Panther Party,
right,
which I feel is so vital because a lot of women's names are not known except Assata and Angela Davis, who like she was really a part of the Communist Party, but she had a lot of relations with the Black Panther Party. So it's not a lot of women that was talked about, but he made it a necessity to include them in there. But it just lays it all out from the actual Black Panther's perspective, who was still a political prisoner. So I think it's vital to like read this book. It's really good. Some people are gonna judge me for this, but I don't care. Where do we go from here? Chaos or Community. This is by Martin Luther King Jr. Now, I think this book is important because there's not, and I know from my own personal experience, like, I didn't really know that Martin Luther King wrote a lot of books. Like, I did not know that until, like, a couple years ago when I was in Barnes & Noble, and I was like, he had a book? I was like, whoa, I gotta get this, because I had no idea. I didn't know that he really wrote like that, because in school you really only hear, I have a dream, and that's about it.
And a few other speeches, and yeah.
Right, exactly. Letting Birmingham, you know what I mean? So I didn't really learn much about what he really was trying to, exemplify and what he believed. And so where do we go from here was so important because there's a lot of, I don't say a lot, but there are specific solutions that I feel like could be applied to our situation now that he talked about. Because this book was like his last book he wrote before he was assassinated. And we know, if we don't know, during the end of his life, he was becoming more radicalized and his views were starting to change because, like we said, people changed. Right. Malcolm X changed himself. The people love to talk about Malcolm X, but he went through so much change as a man, and he was changing as a man as well. So this book is just important because I don't agree with everything, but we need to read what Martin Luther King wrote because that is like gonna actually be tangibly here still, Right. So that book. This is another book that I actually really like this book a lot. It's called Unapologetic. It's a new book written by Charlene A. Carruthers. She founded the Black Youth Project 100, which is based in Chicago. And it's a good book for like millennials and just really anybody that doesn't understand like struggle, like black freedom struggle, black liberation. They don't really know about any of that. She talks about it in a way that's like gives you good key terms. So you understand like the terminology to use, and just like a very direct way of like explaining our situations. And so a couple months ago, I did a debate on reparations, and this book has a case in which the organization Black Youth Project 100 won reparations for their city for a specific case, but we don't really hear about a lot of cases that people fought for demanding reparations that were actually won. And her campaign, the Black Youth Project, won reparations. So I use that to like uphold my debate. So I think this is a really good book for like recent. And the two more, you said 10. I got Black Power. This should be my first book, but Black Power by Kwame Ture and Charles Hamilton is a vital read because especially now we're talking about electoral politics and all that stuff, settling for the lesser of two evils. Well, again, if we had a more thorough and a more substantial political ideology to base our beliefs on, then we would not be so comfortable with compromising our beliefs in the first place. Right. So Black Power is so important because we talk about the Black Power movement, but we don't really understand the ideology behind what that is. Yes, we know examples of what it looks like, but what is it in practice, and what is the political ideology that we can actually try to implement to make systemic change? This book talks about that, and it also talks about the history of just like the Black Power movement as well. And lastly, this book I just got recently. I'm not done with it yet because it's an anthology.
Right.
So it's a different readings, different essays by multiple scholars. But it's called I Am Because We Are, Readings in Black Philosophy, written by a lot of people. It's just an anthology. And it's really good because, you know, I hate European education. I don't like that. You know what I mean? I don't agree with the fact that I took Philosophy 100 and all I learned about was Aristotle. And I don't even remember the rest of them because they're just so irrelevant to me. Like, you know, they're just not, they're irrelevant. And I'm like, why is there no black philosophers?
Right.
Are we not philosophical
Or why
people?
don't we recognize?
Yeah, exactly. Like, why do we disregard them in academia as if they don't exist? So I think this book is important because it shows you the different philosophies of our people so you can make your own analysis for yourself.
Right.
And you don't have to rely on Aristotle and them others. That, you know? So these are like my top books right now. These are books I'm currently reading right now. I don't know if you want to touch on that. I just bought them out. But those are the books I would recommend that were not on Nipsey's list. However, you did mention not to say anything on Nipsey's list, but Blood in My Eye is a for sure read because that's the quote I mentioned from George Jackson.
Right.
But that book is like highly important, and there's a reason why Nipsey read it. There's a reason why I read it, and everybody else who read the book. So please get that book or read it, or if you can, I would recommend that book as well. Yeah.
Most definitely.
Yes.
So welcome to the last segment here on episode 4 of Raw Akademix. I want to thank you all for tuning in. And in this last segment, what we are going to talk with Honey Blue about is where does she see herself in the next 3, 5, or even 15 years? Check it out. So my last question is, in 10 to 15 years, what could we expect from Honey Blue?
And to be alive, honestly, to be living. That was a Tupac quote. But no, for real though, on some real, you know, just to be alive, to be able to still move, you know, freely, to be healthy, you know what I mean, to be a smarter and educated, you know, young woman. I'm still very young, and I have a lot to learn, and more music for sure. I have not came out with an official project, so you for sure will get a project, probably a couple of them in 10 to 15 years from me. And really just more work being done for our people. That's all I'm about. That's all I'll ever really be about. And that's what you can expect from me. I'm a simpleton. Nothing much. Just doing what I can.
Minimal life.
Yep.